You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for September 13th, live. Well, we're down to 4 systems active, whether they're alive or not. Chanthu, of course, the strongest at Category 2, now northeast of Taiwan. Conson, a remnant low. Bobo 3, which is weakened to a depression. And Nicholas, which got named earlier today, now a tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico. 67 storms have formed so far this year worldwide. It's day 105 of Atlantic hurricane season. There is Nicholas there. There's also a 60% chance AOI that will be exiting off the coast of Africa shortly. Another AOI with a 50% chance and could threaten the east coast. And another one near the Azores that has a 10% chance and decreasing. It's day 121 of Eastern Pacific hurricane season, and there's Invest 97E. Chances don't look too good for formation at this point, given the fact that it has been interacting with land quite a bit. The more it does so, the less of a chance it will end up having to develop. In the Western Pacific, you can see Chanthu there. I meant to change the depression color back down to a remnant low, but Conson is a remnant at this point. That is at least news as of a few hours ago. And Chanthu, of course, is a Category 2 that is going to be stalling in due time. In the North Indian Ocean, the only thing here is Bobo 3, which has weakened down to a depression. Again, it did say tropical storm. That was because we had it as such until just shortly before we got this exported. So there were a few changes that were made in the last little bit here. Well, here we are in the Atlantic. This is the satellite imagery, and you can see that we have Nicholas that is looking really massive in terms of its influence, going all the way up towards the Gulf of Mexico. Heavy rain is going to be starting across Texas soon enough there. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see that there's really not much to discern over 97E there. It's not looking that organized. And elsewhere throughout the Eastern Pacific, there's really nothing else to really track. It looks like it's going to be a quiet phase if 97E doesn't really develop at all. In the Western Pacific, this is what it looks like there. You can see Chanthu rolling up north-northeast where it's expected to slow down. Could make a landfall in China south of Shanghai before it finally turns eastwards, and could pose a threat to parts of southern or southwestern Japan as well. So that will be something we're monitoring. Conson at this point is pretty much gone. Not really much to say on that system. And if you look in the North Indian Ocean, I get to say something besides the monsoon season. You can see the depression that has been moving its way slowly inland. It is expected to dissipate in the next day or two there. In the Western Pacific floater, we have it zoomed in on Chanthu, which remains the code orange system on our TCOS operations. Of course, you can see it's been trying to get itself to get its eye more visible again, but however, it's not been the best, and there are indications it could be slightly weaker than what we currently have it at. In the Eastern Pacific, sea surface temperatures look like this, around 27 to 29 degrees Celsius. Those 27s have been popping up a little bit more recently. In the northwestern Gulf of Mexico, those are where the Nicholas will be going into, and the temperatures are pretty good, 30 to 31 degrees Celsius. The rest of the Atlantic looks around 28 to 29. I mean, of course, you can also see the patch led away by Larry there, indicated by that little hole there in the open Atlantic there. So that is interesting to see. Here's the North Indian Ocean. Temperatures are around 28 to 30 degrees Celsius throughout the basin. As you go into the Arabian Sea, it's around 28, although the temperatures steadily decrease to around 25. In the Western Pacific, you can see the temperatures are around 29 to 30 degrees Celsius for majority of the basin, primarily in the Philippine Sea and near the equator. And of course, the southern hemisphere is still looking rather cool, 27 or less. Of course, it gets cooler the further south you go down. So with that, that brings us to the sea surface temperature anomalies, and really the main thing that is, of course, the upwelling led away by Larry. There you can see the trail that it left behind. Some of Ida still visible there. Grace is pretty much been completely wiped out of memory, and the sea surface temperatures and everywhere else is pretty much looking similar to what we've been seeing. Okay, well that was a fail because I forgot to change that out. But there we go, we're back to the scene, and you can see that what we have as of right now. A lot of pretty much land threats to be discussing. Our main topics of discussion tonight will be, of course, Typhoon Chanthu and Tropical Storm Nicholas. Just to go over what we have in terms of knowledge on these systems. We have it at 105 miles an hour. Of course, the interactive count for this hasn't exactly updated yet. Or wait, it has. There we go. It is now down to 100 miles an hour officially. We have it slightly higher at 105. You can see that it looks like it's going to be passing extremely close to the city of Shanghai there, a very populated city in China, before it finally does curve, and it looks like it is now expected to become extratropical shortly after as it passes through the extreme southern end of South Korea. And then, of course, in the Atlantic, there is also Tropical Storm Nicholas, which is dealing with some shear right now. It's in its formative stages. However, once it gets itself organized, it could do some strengthening before it does make landfall. And as of right now, the National Hurricane Center latest cone pretty much makes landfall east of Corpus Christi, near what appears to be Lampasa's Lake, St. Charles Bay. It's pretty much near Holiday Beach or Matagorda Islands. That is what we're looking at for landfall at this time. Of course, the cone goes anywhere between there and potentially even east as Bay City. So that is what we're looking at for that. And the biggest threat to say isn't exactly the wind. The biggest threat is going to be the flooding that we could be seeing once this makes inland. It's expected to slow down massively once this reaches inland, and that is going to be leading to some very hefty rainfall totals in excess of 15 inches possible, especially as you headed towards the coast and into eastern Texas for sure. Definitely not good news for that. So that is what we're looking at in terms of the tropics, and bringing it, if I can get the right tab open, of course, you can see what the National Hurricane Center is highlighting. Unfortunately, we're not done with land threats entirely yet. You can see that there is, of course, another area of interest that looks a little bit uncomfortably close to parts of the East Coast there. And, for example, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, they should be watching this as well. And I would pretty much watch it if you live any near the coastal areas. For example, Ocean Cities, New England, you might want to be watching this. We'll see what happens. Area of interest that was east of the Azores is now down to 10. And then, of course, we still have a 60% chance for that area of interest that'll be exiting Africa soon. And, of course, still 40 for the 97E there. So, regardless, this is what we're left off to. We are joined by a small team today. Isaac, Alfiria, as well as Noah. It looks like we might be joined by Ethan soon, once I give him the necessary stuff. There, he should be able to join now. How are you guys doing, and what do you think of what we're dealing with in terms of the wide world of tropics at the moment?
Well, I'd like to start off, since alphabetically speaking, my name comes first. So in the wide world of tropics, what we're mainly dealing with here is Chanthu, Nicholas, and then those potential AOIs that are, respectively, the one that's currently located on the African continent, and then the area of interest that is expected to form over the next 5 days over and near the Outer Banks. Those, of course, we are seeing, at least with the African AOI, it is, I believe, 1060. And then for the North Carolina, the Outer Banks AOI that we saw, NHC is putting it at 050 right now. Chanthu, currently a major rainfall threat for Shanghai, expected to dump lots of rain there and make landfall near there before turning post-tropical. Nicholas is also a major rainfall threat. Even if it doesn't end up becoming a hurricane, it still will be a massive, massive flooding issue. And so, even with that, and I know this is a bit early to say this, but even though it may just be a tropical storm, it still is a dangerous system, and we all really need to treat this seriously. Especially, the main consensus is that this will be making landfall, I'd say, about a day or two from now. But what we are really expecting is the thing to slow down, and that is going to be a major issue, especially for the coast of Texas.
We're also joined by Ethan. How are you feeling about everything going on right now?
Greetings, Xavier. Well, it's certainly an interesting time that we're in right now. Nicholas rapidly formed earlier today was quite surprising. Uh, that was a tropical storm upon classification. But regardless, regarding Nicholas, I really don't think that there should be hurricane watches right now for the Texas coast. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, but I don't think that this has much of a shot of becoming as much as a strong storm as, say, the NHC is forecasting.
Yeah, of
Just
course.
my thoughts.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. The cone that we did make earlier, at least the one I made, I actually did not forecast as high as the National Hurricane Center. It was only 60 mile an hour, based on the conditions and the fact that we aren't guaranteed the track to the east. Of course, the National Hurricane Center really wants to hook on the fact that it could track to the east, but really, if it's going to be tracking to the east, then the National Hurricane Center should really be looking into forecasting the storm to go east, not rather than keeping it the way it is. So there's a little bit of uncertainty regarding the intensity, but I don't really think that this should be the main thing hovered about, especially if this is going to be, a 15 mile an hour wind difference. In the grand scheme of things, compared to what we're going to be seeing with the flooding and all associated with the system, it's not going to matter too much, especially with the fact we could be seeing 15 or more inches of rain. As of right now, we do have this at a CDPS stage 3. Noah, you're also here. What are your thoughts on what we have right now?
So we have Chanthu north of Taiwan, pretty much at the expected intensity we expected it to have. I think on the last TWB we said Cat 2 or Cat 3 up there, so it's 105 miles per hour currently at our Force 13 analysis. So it's roughly where we expected it to be. But now we see pretty concerning trends on Chanthu as it's expected to make some kind of westward hook near the coast of China and then stall for about 1 or 2 days and then slowly accelerate towards the west, being picked up by this upper level trough. Nicholas looking very disorganized at the current state. We have the surface center, which Recon confirmed far displaced south westward from the convective envelope. And I'm also thinking that the NHC forecast might be a little bit high, as in about 24 to 30 hours, we're gonna see a significant uptick in wind shear. And the wind shear is gonna be at the time when we have this more easterly component in the track on the forecast when it's up there in Texas near Galveston, the shear is gonna be 35 to 40 knots out of a very deep layer of the atmosphere. So we are likely to see when it goes up there, we are likely to see a full misalignment of the vortex and most of the rain on the eastern side, um, which could be pretty significant as the storm is also expected to be moving relatively slowly up there and we could be seeing totals over 15 inches near the coast.
Yeah, just to break some of what we are expected to see from Nicholas here. Of course, the National Hurricane Center issues some of these products. And you can see the chance of tropical storm force winds are around 70 to 80% already on the areas that could be seeing those tropical storm, or at least the landfall location. And it's kind of odd to see hurricane watches issued at the moment, considering the fact that the maximum percentage issued by the National Hurricane Center is 5%. Which is not exactly a percentage that you typically see that results in such watches being issued. In terms of storm surge, we're looking at from the mouth of the Rio Grande all the way up into Port O'Connor, looking at 2 to 4 feet of storm surge. That includes Baffin Bay, Corpus Christi Bay, as well as Aransas and San Antonio Bay. As you go from Port O'Connor to San Luis Pass, this includes Matagorda Bay. That's 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. And as you head from St. Louis into High Island, that includes Galveston Bay. That's 2 to 4 feet. And as you go from High Island into Intercoastal City, 1 to 3 feet. This includes Sabine Lake and Calcasieu Lake. In terms of the rainfall potential we could be seeing out of this, it's going to be relatively significant. There's now those pink zoning areas that could be seeing 15 to 20 inches of rain, and there's a wide swath of areas all the way from Galveston going all the way up into parts of the Texas-Louisiana border there, where rainfall totals of up to 10 to 15 inches of rain can be seen. And even then, Houston, 6 to 10 inches of rain. Lake Charles also 6 to 10. And that goes all the way into portions of southwestern Louisiana and pretty much most of southeastern Texas. So just going off that lopsided nature of this, most of the rainfall associated with Nicholas is going to be on the eastern side. And of course that rainfall is going to be spread relatively far inland in terms of where the center will be. And that's expressed by, of course, the Weather Prediction Center, which issues these excessive rainfall outlooks. And you can see that as of right now, Houston is in the bullseye for this flood risk here, as well as Lake Charles. So if you happen to live in this red shaded area here, you definitely need to be looking at this system closely. This is going to be a significant flood event, more than likely, based on what we have been seeing. I know there were questions before the starting of the stream as to what we thought about the Euro model. To give you context, that one was trying to go completely over the top, predicting up to 61 inches of rain. We can safely say that was a complete outlier, considering the fact that none of the other models predicted above 2 feet of rain. So I really wouldn't put too much weight on the European model at this time. But while we're here, we will look through some of the models that we've got. Just to give an idea of what the models are currently anticipating for some of these systems. You can see as of right now, the GFS takes it to around 992 millibars, which would pretty much be an upper end tropical storm before it does make landfall. And then the remnants, of course, eventually get absorbed by a front, it seems. And then you can see, of course, that 60% AOI that we're monitoring could become the next hurricane of the season. We will see what goes on with that, but it seems that the GFS does not take it past, never mind, they reform it. Okay, so it looks like the GFS forms the 60% AOI, kills it, and then brings it back to life and makes it a Cat 2 again. That is interesting. So that is what we're looking at. That's just one model there. The Canadian model, they pretty much take it much further west and really don't develop it much at all. And that's basically the consequence of that. And then you can see the area of interest coming out of Africa developing. And of course some pretty good model signatures on that. Going to Icon, they pretty much initialized 2 weak, and as a result they have a much weaker storm coming on shore. However, they do have it remaining on water around the same time the National Hurricane Center does. And then of course you can see that they do develop this AOI that we've been monitoring in the Bahamas that could go up. And then of course we're also looking at that 60% AOI that also has a likelihood of developing. GFS doesn't really develop the area of interest too much. They basically have a moisture interaction between what is left of Nicholas and this AOI, combining together and pretty much producing some moderate to heavy rainfall across the mid-Atlantic and northeast states. But other than that, not really much going on in terms of what the GFS has in store for that one. The Canadian model, they don't really develop that much either. But regardless, looking at the ensembles, you can pretty much make out where Nicholas is here. That is right there. And then you can see the AOI that we're monitoring behind that go. Pretty good ensemble support for that AOI, so that is still something that we're looking at there. However, there's some considerable spread as to where it's going to be going. If it takes a more easterly track, it's going to be accelerating. If it takes a western one, it could be a little bit slower. And you can really see all of them going really up there in terms of this AOI that we're monitoring that is exiting the coast of Africa right now. A lot of them wanting hurricane for it, and it could be a little bit long-lived, although the question becomes what happens as it gets out of the NDR, because of course you have a track ranging from the Bahamas all the way up to near Bermuda, so that's a very considerable spread there. That we'll have to wait and see what happens with that one, but regardless, there is some pretty good support that this will be our next long-lived storm. So I hope you haven't been weary of those so far yet. In terms of the Eastern Pacific, we know that we have Ethan, the lover of Eastern Pacific stuff going on here. And, well, needless to say, after 97.8, the Basin's dead. I mean, that's basically the best I can say. There's literally nothing that the models want after this by the looks of things, so, I mean, it's basically a dead Basin after 97.8. So if it doesn't develop, then, well, don't expect much. Same thing with the Central Pacific, don't expect nothing, because nothing's happening the next 2 weeks there. Western Pacific, you can see pretty much Chanthu going on there, doing its little stall before accelerating, becoming extratropical. It seems that northern Japan seems to be the one that could be seeing some heavy rainfall before it goes off and merges with another extratropical low. However, the GFS has been a little bit more consistent on something happening in around 200 hours time. That would be a little bit of a threat to the northern Philippines. However, it's still a little bit too early. But something we will watch nonetheless as long as consistencies remain. So, that is basically what we are looking at in terms of the models here. If you have any questions for us, we're going to be starting that at this point. Please tag us at Force13. That will pop our name up in orange, and that will give us the ability to see your questions, and we will get those answered. We did get some while I was going over everything, so we'll get through some of those right now. Will Nicholas hit Houston? Well, they're actually in the cone, so very close to being in the center of the cone, so yes, you will be hit.
It may not be as strong as it is on the coast, considering how far inland Houston is from what we are expecting landfall point to be, but still, I mentioned this earlier, even if it is a tropical depression or whatever, the flooding from rainfall is still a major concern, and Houston is in the bullseye for that. I really don't know if it's a good idea to compare this, but, I mean, just look at Ida. I mean, Ida was a tropical depression and a remnant low when it flooded almost all of New York City. So it's still a very, very dangerous situation you need to look onto. Even if it isn't going to be much of a windmaker, it's still going to be a heavy rainfall producer, and that is something that we really need to be careful about, because more likely, and I really don't like saying this, statistically speaking, flooding is one of the main leading causes of deaths in terms of natural disasters. And so, going into this, I would start preparing for the worst, hoping for the best at this point.
And of course, that is what we say with every single tropical cyclone that does affect land. I mean, it's already CDPS stage 3, and that's for a tropical storm, which you don't typically see. It's really heavily inflated by the rainfall totals we could be seeing. So, needless to say, you really need to have your flood safety plans in place. Flash flood watches should be issued if they haven't been already in the next day or two. And that is what we're looking at for there. Do you think this can be another Harvey in Houston in terms of the rainfall, not the intensity?
No. Harvey was a completely different beast. Harvey had an issue of where it stalled over Houston for almost the span of... It stalled for almost a week, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or close enough to it. This will not stall over Houston for over a week. And so, Harvey's situation was that you had this rainfall just constantly coming down, and it didn't stop until a week or so afterwards. That's the issue here. Are we going to see this with this storm? In my professional opinion, no. I don't think we're going to see that. Are we going to see major rainfall issue? Yes. Now, if you want to really compare this to a storm in regards to, like, threat levels or whatever, I don't really know exactly how or what storm I could really compare this to, but like, would
I have one.
Probably
Probably Hermione 2010
Hermine
would be
Hermine.
Hermine 2010 would be a pretty decent analog that also went into Texas from the Bay of Campeche in September 2010. But also, when you compare Harvey with the current storm, Harvey dropped over 35 inches in the Houston area over a relatively short amount of time, and this storm is expected to have maximum totals of 15 to 20 inches. So there's not even a comparison.
Yeah, this is, and I know that a lot of people in Houston are really probably scared of this because they hear flooding is the main concern from a tropical storm, and it's Harvey is still in recent memory there, and I completely understand why. It's entirely understandable. But this isn't Harvey, and I think that that is something that people really do need to understand with tropical cyclones is that we have to approach each tropical cyclone on their own merits, right? So like even if it is similar threat-wise, we have to discuss whether or not these threats are as you can't really go and compare tropical storms to each other most of the time, especially whenever you're like, oh, how bad is it going to be? Is it going to be as bad as X storm? Because that isn't really a great way in any way, period, to describe the threat level of a tropical storm or any tropical system out there.
Yep. Let's see here. Next question we have: do you think that Nicholas might impact Texas similar to Allison?
Not really. Allison also dropped, I think it also dropped about 30 inches of rain in some areas.
Yeah.
So these storms where we asked about the comparisons roughly dropped about twice the amounts of rain that are currently expected for Nicholas.
The only storm I can think of that jumped a ton of rain, um, like generally speaking, I know it's a bit too, I know it's still off, but Alberto 94. But that was the majority of the rainfall for that. It was a 24-inch maximum, but that's like the closest I can think of right now. And that's the only storm on my mind that I can think of something that isn't 30 inches in regards to rainfall totals.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still a difference of 9 inches, and that's a very big difference, but I can look and do some research real quick and see if I can find a storm similar.
Well, in the meantime, of course, we also do have someone with us that is literally in the Kona itself under tropical storm warnings, to my knowledge. That would be Isaac. Isaac, how are you taking approach to this system?
Well, I'm obviously watching it really close here. Throughout the day today, we've had on and off showers. Radar has estimated a little over half an inch of rain has fallen. I haven't checked that estimate in a while, so it's probably nearing an inch now. But we've had mostly on and off showers, and it's been pretty much overcast throughout the entire day, with maybe an occasional um, peak of sun in the morning, but that was really about it. And it's only going to decline here. And what I find interesting in this latest forecast cone issued from the National Hurricane Center is that they have the movement down 10 miles an hour, or is that moving north northwest at 12 miles an hour last update, if I recall, and now it's moving. They have it at due north at 2 miles per hour. So it's going to be definitely interesting to see what the next forecast cone after this that they issue, which is around 10 p.m. Central Standard Time, what it'll show on that forecast cone, if it's going to be a later landfall or it's going to be about the same, and they're just going to adjust the track accordingly. Um, and yes, of course, right now I'm under a tropical storm warning right now. I'm currently not really forecasting. I'm not really expecting any winds. Probably any. I'm not expecting winds out higher than about 50, 40 miles an hour or so. And of course, Corpus can handle that, and I'm taking obviously the proper precautions. I had the time to secure the items on my patio. I made sure they're all tied down, and then the plants that I couldn't tie down, put them indoors, just to be on the safe side, because you never know with these storms here. And regarding the rain threat, yes, this is also going to be a decent rain threat here. I have on my screen the forecast totals from the National Weather Service. Now, granted, this is from earlier today, so this is probably going to change a little bit here when they update it. But as of this last update, they had 15 to 20 inches of rainfall occurring in and around the Galveston area of Texas, and near Houston, they had it anywhere from, if you're on the southern side, anywhere from 20 to maybe as far as maybe 6 or 8 inches if we're on the northwestern part of the city of Houston. So a really interesting storm here, and one people should be keeping a really close eye on, especially given how it's slowed down apparently now, according to this latest forecast cone. So, if you're in the path of it, like I am, just keep a close eye on it. I know there's not tropical storm. There's hurricane watches in effect to my northeast due to the uncertainty of the intensity this storm could be. Yeah, that's really all I could about say is just keep a close eye on it. Make sure you keep up with the National Hurricane Center and National Weather Service and your local government officials for the latest information on it, and plan accordingly. And don't make any foolish or stupid decisions. Take this seriously, even though it is a tropical storm. We have seen many dangerous tropical storms before. Obviously, Allison comes to mind.
Alberto 94.
Yeah, Alberto in 1994, and then Tropical Storm Erica in 2015. So it doesn't even take a named storm to cause a lot of damage and fatalities, unfortunately. So I just really want to hammer that into people, to not pay attention to the intensity, just pay attention to the impacts that it's going to be producing in your local area. Xavier.
I do want to mention real quick, because I know that Xavier was, and everyone's just kind of been confused as to why NHC issued that hurricane watch, and I think I might have an idea. I've been thinking about whether or not I should say it, but I think I can say it. I believe that it is an abundance of caution right now, specifically as to why they issued it. And it is what I'm putting myself in the mind of an NHC forecaster, where we don't know whether or not this thing will organize fast enough, because it definitely has a chance of becoming at least a minimum Category 1 hurricane. It's not very high, but it's high enough to where it is a concern. And if I were an NHC forecaster, if just your average American speaking here, they would take a hurricane watch more seriously than they would a tropical storm warning. And so when they see tropical storm warning, they may not take action, but if they look at a hurricane watch, they're like, oh, this is something I really need to prepare for. So it may not even get there, and it may just be canceled within tomorrow if it isn't even expected to become hurricane strength. A watch is simply meaning that there is a possibility that we see hurricane force winds, depending on whether or not this thing intensifies. It's why it's not a warning. So, in my viewing, I think it's an abundance of caution.
Yeah, the National Hurricane Center really state that it's due to, like you said, just an era caution, and because of just the uncertainty and intensity with this, since they believe the further east it'll go, the more intense it could get, and obviously the further west it goes, the less intense it's likely to be. Not to say it can't become a hurricane far west, but it's more unlikely. So that's why they have obviously those hurricane watches, and now of course they have tropical storm warnings in effect for much of the Texas coastline. I have the graphic here from the National Weather Service in Corpus Christi, giving kind of a rundown on the tropical storm warning and what that means, and the hurricane watch and what that means for the areas in it, at least in my region. If you want to pull that up, Xavier, if you can. And you can see over in the tropical storm warnings, they have winds anywhere from 50 to 60 miles an hour with gusts to hurricane force possible. And they say just prepare for scattered power outages and downed trees. With a hurricane watch with a tropical storm warning, they say winds around 55 to 65 miles per hour with gusts to 75 miles an hour. Hurricane force obviously is possible. And they say in this one to prepare for scattered power outages and downed trees. And this is kind of a little rundown of what the meanings are for anybody who may be kind of confused on what they mean by tropical storm warning, tropical storm watch, or a hurricane watch, or a hurricane warning, that sort of thing. This is a little graphic to help you out in that regard. So I just wanted to point that out there. But really good analysis there by Alferia.
We had a question for someone telling us to look at Europe for the next 5 days, and I'm just reiterating the fact that we're not, because the Euro 12Z was a massive outlier. Consider the fact that they were forecasting over 60 inches of rain to fall in some spots in Texas, and of course that is a complete outlier in the sense that no other models forecast over 2 feet of rain from Nicholas. So as of right now, we are not basing any of our forecast on that due to the severe issues that it currently has in terms of the rainfall side of things. While there is possibilities that there are going to be isolated amounts of 2 feet plus possible, in Texas we are talking about the Euro forecasting 5 feet of rain. So, big difference in terms of that there.
Yeah, and I think we're at a point of where, it just takes any person really who knows anything about collecting data. If you know anything about collecting data, if something like that pops up, then you have to basically look at it of, wait a minute, something had to have gone wrong for it to be this off compared to everything else. And that's kind of what we're viewing the Euro as right now, is something probably went wrong in terms of model initialization or something like that. And that's why we're in the situation where it's like, oh, it's going to dump 60 inches of rain, because if it does do that, then that's one thing. But right now, it is extremely improbable, and I mean extremely improbable, that will happen.
Yeah, the problem with the euro was that it had very unreasonably high p-watt values associated with the storm into Texas, which the other models aren't showing. So the euro has a much more moistened air mass into Texas, and it's unlikely that this will happen, as we have a very strong wind shear by the time it goes into Texas. And you can also already see the effect of this wind shear as the surface center is right to the southeast of the southernmost deep convection associated with the storm. So we already see the misalignment of the vortex, and I'm really looking forward to this failing to intensify maybe at all, as the structure at the current time is really poor, and the shear hasn't even gotten to the point where it's very hostile, and it's already looking very bad on satellite and with the combined with the recon data. This is also probably what caused the slowdown of the storm in the NHC cone. Has something to do with the misalignment of the vortex currently.
Yeah. Let's see here. Still got quite a few questions to go here, so I'll try to get those as those come in. Well, that was a rude interruption by my cat there.
Hi, Mittens.
Anyways, ignoring the cat here, couldn't Nicholas become a hurricane considering how slow it is moving? I think we just self-explanatory answered that one. The shear looks to be a little bit too high for that to happen. Are you monitoring any disturbances in the Western Pacific? None in the next 5 days, although there are rumblings for the week 2 period. Do hurricanes hit more land than earthquakes? Well, earthquakes are much more frequent, so I mean, yeah. Moving on. Could Nicholas? Oh, that was the same question. Is Nicholas going to be a hurricane? And sorry for my spelling. While the National Hurricane Center indicates the possibility, more than likely it probably won't. Don't count it out entirely yet. Another person asked, could Nicholas dissipate due to the wind shear?
Probably not entirely. We had such situations in the past where we had very strong wind shear, and you could see the possibility where you have just a naked vortex with no convection associated with it over it, and a completely misaligned mid-level center, similar to what we are seeing now, where the surface center is actually completely displaced to the southeast of the center. When we get up there, it will probably more to the exact east of the center. And I'm concerned with the rain threat more about the maybe if it takes more of the eastern path, it should actually be more Louisiana and the very eastern part of Texas that would be in the rain threat because of the strong shear, which is completely shearing off the cloud tops. But full dissipation is very unlikely, even in such a strong shear scenario where you got 45 to 40 knots of deep layer shear.
Yeah, indeed. Let's see here. What would you think of Nicholas' progress over the last few hours?
Well, it has been a it got a tropical storm designation, but still has been not really organizing that much. We see some convection, but mainly to the northeast of the storm, as mentioned before. The surface center very displaced towards the southeast and very broad in its nature, and there haven't been any significant pressure faults so far. Pressure at around 1008, 1009 millibars at the current time. Uh, Not really overly impressive storm right now. Very broad general circulation. Um, we had at the time of designation there was just a very small area of concentrated convection, of concentrated vorticity, and we had more of a convergent axis associated with the storm in a elongated broader circulation, which this smaller tighter circulation was part of. And currently the storm still has this broad state, and really the main threat of this is a rainfall, and I don't see it becoming stronger than 65 miles an hour. I think the shear is too much of a detrimental factor to this.
Yeah, wind shear is going to be relatively up there for compared to what we've been seeing in the Gulf of Mexico this year. I don't know what you mean by is the invest in the Atlantic, considering the fact that all invest are practically dead now. Invest 93L is down to a 0% chance entirely. I'm pretty sure the one that's coming off the African coastline soon will probably get the next tag. Of course, the next tag would be 95L. Someone asked, is Hermine 2010 a good analog for Nicholas? We went over that. Yes. Is Nicholas's center outside the cone? Does anyone know that one?
No, but it's south of the main convection of the storm, so it's misaligned. But I don't know about if it's in the cone.
Let's see.
Well, if the center is, for example, to the west of the cone, and it's also a shallow vortex at the surface, or over the surface center, it's more likely to go just west into Texas very soon, as the main flow in the very low layer of the atmosphere is out of the southeast.
Alright, let's see here. Thank you, Dragon Lady, for becoming a member for our channel. That just happened. If Nicholas veers eastward, how much would it improve as a result?
Not much. I mean, if it makes landfall on Texas early, I think it has limitations on the intensity. But if it goes further north and east, the wind shear will be a very detrimental effect to the intensity, as mentioned before. 35 to 40 knots of wind shear up there, by the models. When it goes up to the Texas coast, roughly near Galveston or Houston, a lot of westerly wind shear. The surface flows out of the southeast. The upper level flow is straight out of the west. Both flows are relatively strong, and that creates a very hostile wind shear.
Another question that we had, why did they go back from 99L to 91L? Well, we had 90L in between, and every single investor only in the 90s, and they rotate. So pretty much after 99, we go back to 90, and then we go back to 99, and so on. And needless to say, that's pretty much how it works. It's always been like that. Could 95L become a next name hurricane? We don't have 95L at this time. 95L would be the next tag for the next invest that develops. Of course, that would more likely be the African wave that is about to exit off. But as of right now, we do not have 95L. But if you're asking whether that African wave has a chance of becoming the next hurricane, that does have a pretty good shot at it. Someone asked, how big is Nicholas? if anyone has the info about the tropical storm force wind extent.
If I had to assume
Yeah,
right now,
yeah, I have
the
that info.
well, if I had to assume that the eastern side would be the most dominant of tropical storm force winds, so even as the system approaches the coastline, I don't think that many locations will receive tropical storm force winds until it really gets really close to the coastline, perhaps.
Yeah, and currently, tropical storm force winds extend 90 nautical miles up to the northeastern quadrant, and no tropical storm force winds in any of the other quadrants except for the northeastern one. Uh, so there you can see that we still have a pretty weak storm.
Let's see here. Moving on. Oh, we got a lot of questions lately. Do you think 2021 will break the landfall record in 2020 for the United States?
Too early to tell, as we always say.
Yeah, of course, you typically see.
Maybe.
You typically, okay, I don't know what we're up to in terms of landfall so far this year, but I mean, of course, October is typically a month that we see more of the U.S. landfalls, primarily on the Gulf Coast from Louisiana into Florida, Florida especially. So I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but the chances seem low considering the fact that I don't think we've had as many landfalls as we had by this time last year yet. Someone asked, can we use up all the names in the Atlantic like we did in 2005 and 2020? It's looking possible. I mean, we are up to 14 named storms. That makes us already 2/3 of the way through the naming list. And with 2 more medium chances, that number of names left in the Atlantic could go down to 5. So pretty much, if the second half of September remains just as active and we have a relatively decent October in terms of tropical cyclone activity, there's definitely a shot at it. That is for sure. A higher chance than normal that we will get to the auxiliary list. Of course, it wouldn't be Greeks. We would be starting off with Adria. Someone asked, is 97E negatively affecting Nicholas?
No. The shear is from the upper level low or trough over Mexico. So, big upper level trough there. This is causing the shear. The trough is expected to retrograde away and weaken and thin out, like your typical trough, which left to its own devices in the tropics. And then for a brief time you get a upper level anticyclone building over the storm, but which is currently in the Gulf of Mexico, southern Gulf of Mexico, this upper level anticyclone. This is practically stationary, and the storm moves out of its influence into a belt of strong westerlies, which are going to shear the storm apart.
And of course, we also have another one. Which one do you think is more accurate so far this year, the Euro or the GFS?
GFS.
Well, I guess that explained that one, self-explanatory. Another question that we had, will Nicholas's rotation affect how it grows? Not sure what you mean by that one.
Not sure either.
It seems that we have been joined by Christian. You've been looking into this when you can, and what are your thoughts on what we've been looking at the last few hours on Nicholas here?
Well, again, Nicholas is one of those new systems that just formed today, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I haven't had a lot of time to think about what it's doing, but where it's headed right now is not good.
Alright, let's see here. Trying to get through the wall of messages AU posted. If you have any more questions, keep in mind there's only 10 minutes left before we do head off, as our TWBs are usually 1 hour. So if you have any questions about Chanthu or Nicholas, primarily, just let us know, tag us at Force 13, and we will be able to answer those questions. And of course, the latest ATCF that was posted for 0Z, although some of those are actually outdated significantly. So not all the information that you just saw there in the chat is completely up to date. Can Nicholas be upgraded into a hurricane before landfall? Again, it's in the cards. It's why hurricane watches are currently in effect. But as of right now, we are not forecasting this to be a hurricane. A 60-mile-an-hour peak is what we're going with. The National Hurricane Center has 65. So that is what we're looking at in terms of wind speeds. How bad for Louisiana? The more southwestern you are, the more rain you're going to be getting. Pretty much 6 to 10 inches of rain seems to be the likelihood for Lake Charles westwards. Will Chanthu hit Shanghai? That seems pretty likely at the moment, in terms of impacts there.
Yeah, and one thing we haven't mentioned so far is the incredibly massive rainfall threat that goes from Chanthu, which is even higher than that of Nicholas. I know we have some bias to favor the Atlantic to cover that one, but I just wanted to briefly go over some of the things that we have with Chanthu. It's expected to move northward and then run against the big ridge to the north and make some kind of slight westerly turn. And then it gets entangled between two mid-level ridges. The one to the west of the storm is trying to steer it towards the south, and the one to the east is trying to steer it northward. Both of those steering flows are practically canceling out, and we have the storm stalling practically for 2 days or for 1 or 2 days in the Shanghai area, and we are expecting rainfall totals. For example, the Euro has been showing up to 30 inches of rain in the Shanghai area, so extremely dangerous flash flooding concerns arising there. Flash flooding from rainfall is one of the main causes of death in tropical cyclones, and I would definitely be prepared if I live near a river in the Shanghai area or near a hill, which could be susceptible to mudslides. Very dangerous rainfall threat coming for China. Even more rainfall than it's expected with Nicholas in Texas. Some models are indicating about double the rainfall totals that are expected in Texas. That could honestly be a huge threat to China as it expected to stall. I can't emphasize this enough. Up to 30 inches of rain expected there, and it's a metropolitan area with millions of people.
They just seem to have not caught a break this year. I believe earlier this year they had a similar flooding threat with another tropical system. I can't put the name of it on in my head
Infa.
right now. Yeah, Infa. And now they're dealing with the second one here, so that's not good news at all for them. So I hope that they're taking it seriously and taking the proper action ahead of time, so they don't have to deal with the consequences.
Yeah.
Of course, we are going into the last few minutes here, and what is leading Nicholas to strengthen? Warm sea surface temperatures are probably the biggest trend at the moment, and in fact that relative humidity values are still 60% and will remain above that threshold for some time there. It's mainly the wind shear that's going to be acting against that. That's going to be the big heavy hitter against Nicholas there. Will Nicholas bring rain to North Texas? Northeastern Texas probably, but in terms of the northern panhandle, significantly less, if any. Let's see here. If you have any more questions about any of the systems active, this is their last chance before we do head off in a few minutes, so prepare to tag us at Force 13. We'll pop our name up in orange, and that will give us these last few minutes to answer any last minute questions you may have before we do go off. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting looking at the progress of Chanthu, of course. It's been quite the storm to come back from such an inactive August in terms of typhoons, since we had virtually nothing that reached that intensity there. We started off August with a very significant influx of storms, but none of them reached typhoon intensity. It was just really a mess overall. And then September just came back and just really amazed a lot of people that were tracking in the meteorological community with how intense this thing got. And just the impacts that we're seeing right now are very serious. This has now impacted the northern Philippines, the Luzon Strait, Taiwan. Now it's impacting China. It will impact South Korea and Japan too. So just a significant population being impacted by Chanthu. And then of course you have Nicholas, which is another U.S. threat. Unfortunately, we've already seen quite a few. To my knowledge, we've now had Claudette, Danny, Elsa, Fred, Henri, and Ida, and now we are looking at Nicholas as well. Grace hit Mexico.
Puerto Rico exists.
Yeah, I was counting continental U.S. landfalls.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, needless to say, it's been quite the year. So, how many AOIs in the Atlantic? On top of Nicholas, there are 3 others. One in the east of the Azores with a 10% chance. One exiting the coast of Africa with a 60, and one near the Bahamas that is expected to go northwards with a 50. What should I do about Nicholas? I'm just west of Houston. Have a flood safety plan ready to go. There's going to be some significant rainfall just west of Houston, possibly 6 to 10 plus inches of rain. Could be seeing even 10 to 15. So you definitely want to be prepping for that. Be prepared for flash flood watches if they haven't been issued already. And you really need to be making sure that any last preparations need to be completed, because of course you're not going to be seeing the worst of the wind since you're further inland, but rainfall is going to be the serious threat, as this is going to be sticking around for about 2 days tops. So that will be something that you will have to deal with that system. So please make sure you have any necessary things like food for the next 2 weeks. You are ready to know what happens if you lose power in the event that happens. You know what to do in the event flooding strikes. Turn around, don't drown. And if you handle anything that you officials do give you, of course, the National Weather Service local offices have Twitter pages where you can see the graphics and what they are urging you to do. That's another good source that you can use.
If you don't mind, Xavier, I'd like to read off the Weather Prediction Center's Day 3 outlook discussion for Tuesday. That says regards some interesting thoughts that they're giving. They're saying Nicholas will continue its onward progression inland, bringing heavy amounts of precipitation to the area. I also want to note this is for Tuesday. Quantitative precipitation forecast amounts have increased quite a bit with the latest model runs, with 4 to 6 inches forecast to fall during this period, with pockets of 6 to 9 inches. This brings 48-hour totals in some areas to 9 to 12 inches of rainfall, which could lead to significant flooding concerns, especially for urban areas like the Houston metropolitan area. A moderate risk was added for the Day 3 outlook to up the messaging that numerous flooding is likely to occur that could lead to significant damage and life-threatening situations. The precipitation trends will also continue to be closely monitored over the next 12 hours, with consideration for a high-risk event possibly to be issued in coming outlooks for the Houston metropolitan area. And if I had to guess, that probably happen tomorrow.
Yep, so a serious thing, and while we have a little bit of time left, someone was asking when the next recon for Nicholas is.
Well, we have
Should
one
be
in.
very soon.
Yeah, we have one in right now, currently investigating the system, and it should become once that one goes back to base, we should get another one shortly after that.
And yeah, Isaac, of course, you were making some last-minute preparations by the looks of what you said there in live discussion. You are, of course, getting prepared for the system. It is going to be impacting you, so hopefully you do make it out already, of course, with the rainfall being one of the significant factors of the storm. I know there's been quite a lot of rainfall in this area, hasn't there?
Yeah, there's been we've gone the past 2 months or so without too much in the way of rain, but earlier this year we just got drenched by just rain event after rain event, which is extremely unusual for our area. Usually we see, at most maybe 1 or 2 rain events a year, and then we dry out for a long period of time and it's over with. But this year, it's been the exception, and we've had below normal temperatures and above normal rain, and that seems to be continuing here with the threat of Tropical Storm Nicholas. For my area, at least, I'm expecting probably no more than about 50, 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts or so. But of course, that could easily change within the next 3 hours here, depending on what Nicholas decides to do. But obviously, I'm keeping a close eye on it, and as should everybody else in the forecast cone, should be keeping a close eye on Nicholas here. Make sure you listen to your National Hurricane Center, National Weather Service, and local officials for the latest information on the storm in a particular area. And stay safe and just hope for the best here. That's really all I could say at this point.
Well, of course, a big thanks to the team for coming. We have pretty much reached the end. Consisting at the end of our team today was Isaac, Christian, Alfiria, Ethan, and Noah, and presenting here tonight. My name is Xavier Burns. I thank you guys for coming, and of course, thank you guys, you viewers, for coming as well. You guys help us get the coverage out, the information out there, so that way you know what to make. So with that, that brings us to the On This Day. On this day, a storm was actually hitting Texas, a Category 2 with the name of Ike in 2008. That was the only system in the Atlantic, and on the other side of the world was Typhoon Chanthu, a Category 3 that was going to be stalling as it approached the island of Taiwan. So some kind of similarities compared to what we're seeing this year, with Ike, of course, being the fact that we're going to be seeing a Texas landfall, and Chanthu, of course, Chanthu did recently pass east of the island of Taiwan as well. Our On This Day products are powered by Cyclone History. You can find them on the Twitter below. So, with that, the next name of the Atlantic is now Odette and Peter. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Pamela and Rick. And in the Central Pacific, we're still waiting on Hone. Moving on over to the Western Pacific, the next two names here in this particular basin are now Dianmu, followed by Mindul. In the North Indian Ocean, we're looking out for Gulab and Shaheen. And then, of course, we'll be switching it over to the Southern Hemisphere, particularly the Southwestern Indian Ocean, where the next two names there are now Anna and Batsire. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby, and in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cody. We will be back for another Tropical Weather Bulletin that is live tomorrow night, and of course, we'll be keeping you updated with our storm updates and other live coverage.